In the mosques, fiery speeches are made against the English. The excitement of the population is increasing. 60,000 Afghan riders are ready to march.
The German agents who'd slipped into the Ottoman Empire as a travelling circus were now crossing Persia, disguised as tribesmen. On the 19th of August 1915, they evaded Russian patrols and entered Afghanistan. Their mission: to raise a Muslim army against the British and invade India. The team had been on the road for 9 months and had spent much of the time arguing about what route to take and who was in charge. The answer to that was German spy Oskar von Niedermeyer. Then Enver Pasha had second thoughts. The Germans, in stirring up countries to revolt against their Russian and British masters, encouraged ideas of independence. This clashed with Enver's vision of uniting all Muslims in an expanded all-Turkic empire. Enver pulled the Turks out of Niedermeyer's mission, leaving the Germans to go it alone. And when they finally reached Kabul, the Emir of Afghanistan kept them waiting another 2 months before he'd even see them.
His Excellency listed the reasons why he could not receive us earlier. It of course had nothing to do with anything political. He compared us with tradesmen, with lots of wares from which he could pick whatever he fancied and considered necessary. Everything seemed to be a business transaction for him.
The Emir played the Germans off against the British. Great riches, even his country's independence, were at stake. He hit Niedermeyer with a demand for £10 million and 100,000 rifles and guns. While Niedermeyer's party waited for the Emir to decide whether to invade India, they blundered about, offending Muslim sensibilities.
In order to enjoy some forbidden alcohol, the soldiers secretly brewed schnapps. The first drunkard, a sight never before witnessed in Afghanistan, as it is a religious blasphemy, caused severe public anger.
The Emir had long been on the British payroll. Now they upped the bribe to keep Afghanistan on side.
There were rumours of the arrival of huge money transports from India. We worked it out that the closer this caravan got, the icier our relationship with the Emir became.
Niedermeyer and the Germans finally realized they were pawns in the Emir's game and abandoned the operation. Jihad wasn't set in the east ablaze, but it still had the power to petrify the British. And Enver had no intention of halting his expansionist plans. He sent Colmar von der Goltz, a distinguished German field marshal, to take over command in Iraq and drive the war through Persia into India. Then 72 years old, von der Goltz kept in touch with his family.
I could never have imagined that in my old age fate would take me so far out into the world, and that I would travel in the steps of Alexander the Great through countries that filled our imaginations when we were young.
Britain decided a show of strength was needed in the Middle East to persuade the Arabs that the British were the masters there, not the Germans or Turks.
The capture of Baghdad would create an immense impression in the Middle East, especially in Persia, Afghanistan, and on our own frontier, and would counteract the unfortunate impression created by want of success on the Dardanelles.
By May 1915, a British division under Major General Sir Charles Townshend was advancing up the Tigris through Iraq, then part of the Ottoman Empire. Just 25 miles short of Baghdad, they were halted by the Turkish 6th Army. The British fell back on Kut, a town on a loop in the Tigris. The Turks surrounded them, and the British settled in for a siege. Major Dunn, who drew this map, wrote home on Christmas Day.
A very good dinner today. Mutton, Scotch broth, salmon mayonnaise, chicken conflay, roast duck and green peas, Italian eggs, chocolate. And, of course, we toasted all our dear ones at home.
The British found themselves up against Colmar von der Goltz, now in charge of the besieging Turkish army, his conquest of India on hold.
Unfortunately, the English have dug in well, and we don't have the technical means to get rid of them. Whether we will meet again in good health is in God's hand.
Townsend was optimistic they'd all be rescued within days. But by January, with the food running out, their own cavalry came reluctantly to the rescue.
About 3 weeks ago, the first horse fell under the butcher's knife. Since then, they have been slain daily, about 20 a time. We have it in steak and kidney pie, horse mince, horse rissoles, potted horse, horse soup, stuffed horse meat, etc. Ad nauseam.
Hundreds of British soldiers died trying to save Townsend's garrison.
This morning there was a strong English attack. Between the battle lines, the field is covered with English corpses.
The relieving force downstream has again failed to get through. General Townsend has issued a communique to us. The eyes of India and England are on us, and we shall go down as heroes, which doesn't do us much good. I'd sooner not be a hero in Kut and have plenty to eat.
The men are dying off fast now from starvation, scurvy, pneumonia. The Tommies are sticking it out better than the Indian troops, who refuse to eat mule or horse.
On the 24th of April, during the last desperate days of the siege, a gallant attempt was made to send a ship carrying 270 tons of food up the Tigris to Kut. Ali Ihsan was one of a group of Turks who stretched a cable across the Tigris, ensnaring the supply ship.
We confiscated an English boat which contained all kinds of food, enough to feed 5,000 for 2 months. It was called Julenar, but we renamed it Kendigelen, the godsend.
Townsend became so desperate that the British made an offer to Turkish General Halil Pasha for the freedom of the garrison.
General Townsend offered to me 1 million English pounds for the freedom of the English army. Had this offer been made in other circumstances, my answer would have been one word out of the barrel of my rifle. Trying to keep my calm, I replied that I took this offer as a joke.
Finally, on the 29th of April 1916, after 146 days of siege, Townsend surrendered. An even more humiliating defeat than Gallipoli.
All up now. A terrible pity. Never shall I forget that morning of surrender. We settled down to the melancholy task of destruction. Poor gunners. Some were in tears as the guns they were so proud to have tended were blown to pieces. The Turks marched in at noon and took over the place. By the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept.
Field Marshal von der Goltz died of typhus just before the Turkish victory at Kut. But it was in line with something he wrote, an unusually modern and prophetic view.
For me, the present war is only the beginning of a long historical development, at whose end will stand the defeat of England's world position. The hallmark of the 20th century must be the revolution of the coloured races against the colonial imperialism of Europe.
The evening after the fall, Turks and Arabs moved through the narrow streets of the city to where we had buried the much-loved Field Marshal a few days earlier. The Turkish commander wanted to bring the news of the fall of Kut el Amara to the dead leader whose achievement it was.
Townsend sailed off to a comfortable captivity in Constantinople. During the siege, 1,750 of his British and Indian soldiers had died, but the worst lay ahead. 12,000 men were marched through the desert to Baghdad.
A large percentage of the men were quite done for and couldn't possibly march another inch. They were lying on the ground, suffering from high fever and dysentery, and were smothered from head to foot in filth and covered with flies.
By the war's close, over 4,000 veterans of Kut had died in prison camp, victims of willful neglect by both Turkey and Britain.
Never come back no more, boys. Never come back no more. The camp is becoming a bore, boys. It's becoming a terrible bore. Shut up the old shop window. Put a notice over the door. We're packing our kits for the jolly old Ritz, and we'll never come back no more.
The Allies had written off the Ottoman Empire from the start, but then suffered major defeats at its hands. The Turks would see out the war. It wasn't Allah or the Germans that kept them fighting to the end, but self-defense and political ambition. In the next episode of the First World War, the giants Russia and Germany clash on the Eastern Front, and millions get caught in the middle. A war without pity or rules.